today with the Word. And let's stand in reverence of God's Word and read what He has to say to us this morning. Titus chapter 2 as we stand. And we're going to start with verse 6. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing to say about us. You may be seated. We're finishing up a series today of Unstoppable. Last week we talked about the unstoppable vision. The unstoppable vision that we are going to, hopefully over the next few months, maybe even a year, might do a little different things to make our vision a little bit more clear, what we want to do, what we want to accomplish, and how we want to do that. So if we have an unstoppable vision, that means that we've got to start to develop and start to bring up people behind us to have an unstoppable future. It is important for us to have that unstoppable future. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I want us as a church to be excited. I want us as a church to be on the edge of our seats, waiting to see what God wants to do with us next. I want you to be excited about it because we have a lot to accomplish in God's kingdom here in Columbiana. This week I want us to go from sharing our unstoppable vision to learning, as we just heard, how we can have an unstoppable future. Because we've got people behind us who are coming up, who are going to be doing this, who are going to be leading, and God's going to be using. So let's look at how we can do that today. There was a man who was walking on the beach one day. And as he was walking on the beach, a magic lamp came up on the beach. He rubbed the lamp just like you always do, because magic lamps always come up on the beach when I'm there. So you rub the lamp, and all of a sudden this genie came out. And he said, you have one wish that you can ask for. And so he thought for a moment. He thought if he only had one wish, he was going to wish for an opportunity for prosperity. And so he came to the decision. He simply wanted the genie to give him a year in advance the stock page so he would know what to invest in. And so, boom, there comes the stock page. He gave him the stock page just like he requested. All the financial things that he would need to know a year in advance. And so he began to make his future portfolio. He began to trade. He began to buy. He began to sell. He began to do all this stuff. And just so he would be able to be rich a year later. And so he put away the paper. And as he was putting the paper away, he noticed there was writing on the back. And as he started reading the back of it he realized was an obituary a year in advance. And the first name on the page was his. He's going to plan for the future, but he wasn't going to get to enjoy it. So have you ever thought about your future? Have you ever thought about it? It's amazing. We make plans every day for events that may or may not come into fruition, but we always make plans in advance. Are we like the man on the beach who thinks, well, we'll plan in advance, but just to discover in the future, you might not get to enjoy that. But see, we do got to plan. We got to make sure the future has something that is behind us. We need to be knowledgeable of the future. We need to understand that it is important to not only the church, but important for the kingdom. Charles Kettering said, we should all be concerned about the future because we will have to spend the rest of our lives there. And hopefully all of us will understand that we will spend the rest of our lives in eternity with God. And so we've got to start planning. We've got to start looking forward. James reminds us in James chapter 4, 13 through 15, he says this, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that city, spend a year there carrying on business and making money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if this is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. You see, it is important for us to right now to start to plan for the future. James tells us our life can be just like a mist. And what's going to happen if something happens to us if we don't have a future for our church? Proverbs chapter 16, verse 1 says, to man comes the plans of the heart, but from the Lord comes the reply. You see, if we study the Bible, if we look through the Bible, we look through the pages, we see that God is continually planning for the future, using the people in the Bible. We see that Moses had Joshua planning for him. For when Moses led them, Joshua was going to take over because Moses knew he wasn't going to be here forever. We have Elijah and Elisha who took over for Elijah. And then most importantly, we see Jesus. Jesus planning for the future by working through the 12 disciples. I'm currently reading a book right now entitled He Sat Down. The whole premise of the book is about Jesus ascending to heaven after his resurrection. And the whole part of it is making us understand that while Jesus was here, he did a lot of things, didn't he? He did miracles. He healed people. He did a lot of things. And then the disciples were to follow in his footsteps. And there is a part of the book I read last night that there was one part where the disciples just weren't able to cast out a demon. And so they still had to rely on Jesus. But he was passing on to them the power of the Holy Spirit. He was passing on to them that they could do what Jesus did. He was passing on a future when he was going to sit with the Heavenly Father. So he understood what it was about planning for the future. As I said last week, I don't want us to forget about the past. There's a lot of wonderful things that happened in the past here at Columbiana. I understand that. I understand that there were people who sacrificed. I understand there were people who taught, who gave, who sweated and bled for different things of this church. And I think it's great and we want to honor that past. But in order to honor that past, we've got to look forward to the future. We need to start planning so future generations can look back and say, man, I am so glad that that church back in 2019 took the time, took the seriousness to make our future bright here at First Christian. So we don't want to forget the past, but we also don't want to dwell on what happened in the past. We want to continue to move forward. And I want us to get excited about the future, about what we can do in this community. And I know there are already a lot of great things going on. And I was told, this week we have Oasis. I'm looking forward to being a part of that again. I like being around the people, seeing the people come, knowing that we're here to help them. So how do we pass that on to our future generation? When we look at Paul in the New Testament, we see that he's a man who is constantly concerned about the churches, about the future of the church. As an established church, he constantly kept his eye open for someone who would follow behind him, who would continue on that church plant. He wanted someone to do that. So we see here in the book of Titus, as we just read, that Titus is this man. Here Titus is on the island of Crete. Now Crete wasn't a very spiritual place. Crete was a place an island that was known for gluttons, it was known for liars, it was known for cheats, and the gospel was going to be hard found there. But Paul found a way, and Paul found a person who would preach the gospel, establishing the church, moving it forward there. But yet the nature of his ministry required him to find someone to continue on. Paul knew that he wasn't going to be there forever. He understood that, and that person was Titus. And for that reason, Paul writes this letter to him. He understood the hardships that were going on there. And so he writes him this letter telling him what he must do to ensure the future of the church. And he tells his young apprentice three things that I don't think only apply to him, but I think also apply to us today as well. And the first thing is this, is that we need to have a future. I mean, we need to develop this. We have got to understand that Paul in this passage was talking to a group of people. He was pointing out some people that we need to see here. He was talking about old men, older women, young men. And yet we need to understand there's a lot of developing that needs to happen. And so the first thing we've got to do is we've got to develop young believers. We've got to develop them. One thing we do know about the future of the church is the rest of it is in the hands of those who are under us. We've got to understand that. And we have to be in the process of building those people up, the children and the youth. It's hard to say that I'm old. I don't look at myself as old. I want to be 49 in July. But I do know how I'm old. When I got out of bed this morning, I start to notice I'm making a lot of different noises when I get out of bed. The noises that I didn't make before. But that doesn't mean I'm still not youthful at heart. That I still can't encourage those behind me. You see, you got to understand, 25 years from now, the current leadership that is here isn't going to be here. So are we preparing for that? Are we preparing for that? Paul told Timothy, and things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others. You see, the idea of passing on the baton from generation to generation is imperative to have a future. I am excited about what the church is doing here. I am excited for VBS tomorrow. I can't wait to see all those kids come in from the community. I can't wait to see all the volunteers who have taken time to prepare their lessons, to prepare, most importantly, the food, because I enjoy snack time. Okay? And I'm excited to see this church come together and lift up, as Curtis said, those children for a week. Children who have come from broken homes. But not only the children that are coming, but what I'm excited to see is Zach getting the other youth involved and helping and volunteering. It is exciting to know that I'm in a church where youth is important. This past week, I got to see the privilege and honor to see Zach in his little game day. They have a game day on Thursday, and the kids come over and play games at the parsonage, at the office. And it was cool to see about 8 to 9, 10 kids there just having fun. It's not always about just teaching, but it's about being around each other, lifting each other up, encouraging one another. And I'm so glad I'm part to have a staff that is concentrating on the future of the church. You see, we've got to understand that it is so important. Listen to this statistic. 85% of people make their decision for Christ by the age of 14. So tell me, youth ministry, children ministry isn't important. To me, it's so important. I decided to follow Jesus when I was 10 years old. I didn't decide to be a preacher until I was about 16, 17 years old. And I remember that. And it was just a move of God at a conference where God just said, you need to be in ministry. And at first, being young, I had to do youth ministry, right? Because that's what young ministers do. They start out in youth ministry. Not all of them, but we do. But then I never dreamt that it would come to a point where I was preaching, sharing the Word of God with adults. But most importantly, also being a witness and example to kids under me. One of my favorite things is people always ask me, where was your dad a preacher at? Because we automatically think if you're a preacher, then your dad's a preacher, right? No, he wasn't. My dad worked for the gas company. He worked for the gas company. He wasn't a preacher. And the reason why I'm so excited about church that influences kids is because that's what my church did for me. And I'm excited that we have a church that does that. You see, our focus needs to be developing the faith of younger people, of being there for them, lifting them up. How is this accomplished? First, by encouraging self-control. Encouraging the kids to be self-controlled. Developing young believers to encourage them to make good decisions. To encourage them and lift them up. Lift them up. Lift them up is the idea of helping someone over a wall. Just getting them over. Giving them that extra push. You see, encouragement begins with a lifestyle of helping people. There was an overzealous preacher who was kind of excited because he wanted to make Christians. He wanted to make disciples. He wanted people to become Christians. And so one day he said, I'm going to go and sit on the city bus. And the first guy that comes into the bus, I'm going to tell him about Jesus and I'm going to make him become a Christian. And so the doors open and this drunk comes in. He's been drinking for 3 or 4 hours and he sits down on the seat next to him and he says, brother, he goes, do you know that you're going to hell? And he's shaking his Bible on his face. He goes, do you know that you're going to hell? And the drunk looked at him and goes, oh no. He goes, I did it again. He goes, I got on the wrong bus. You see, the world doesn't need to know that it's going to hell. What the world needs to know is how to be shown how to get to heaven. Amen. That's what the world needs. How do we get to heaven? We know there's a heaven. We know there's a hell. Obviously, we don't want to send them to hell, so how are we going to encourage them to go to heaven? Encouragement is to feel people, to see that need, to be lifted up. In a world that is constantly bombarding us with pain and destruction, encouragement is one of the best gifts that we can offer. But are we simply to develop young believers to make them feel good? No. Paul says that we encourage them to have self-control and make good decisions. And what a great witness it is on the island of Crete for Christians living not for themselves, but living for God. To replace their carnal nature with a spiritual nature. You see, the word self-control literally means level-headed, or listen to this, God in control. Is God in control of your life? You see, the lack of self-control leads to nothing but trouble. So we need to help young people make good moral choices. We need to help young people be distinctive in their lifestyle, for them to stand up for their faith. And we need to teach them not to simply feel good about themselves, but to do good. To do good, to show the love of Christ. That leads us to the second part we need to prepare for, and that is that mature believers must set the example. Verse 7. We set the example by doing what is good. Several years ago, Christianity Today asked the question, who was the most admired Christian in America? And so who was the first person that came to mind? Probably Billy Graham. Billy Graham was the first person. And so they asked him this question. They asked him, he says, what is Satan's attack? How do you understand Satan's attack? Because we know Satan is real. We know that he is out there attacking. He says, how do you stack up against his attacks? And Graham said this. He says, I put several moral fences up in my life. He said, one is, I never am in a car by myself with another woman except my wife. This one wasn't in there, but it's one that I read. He said whenever he would go to different cities, he would always have someone else go into the hotel before he goes. So just to make sure there was nothing in there or anybody in there that would make the scene look bad if he were to walk in on there. He said he never takes any money from the ministry except for what he does, his ministry. If there's any extra money, he gives it to other organizations. And this one just really caught me, and it just made me stop and think for a moment of the seriousness of being and living for Christ. He said this, I remind myself daily, he reminds himself daily, that if I fall into sin, if I mess up, I will dishonor the name of Christ. I will dishonor the name of Christ. Graham's example is one worthy of following. I would hopefully encourage you all. You see, if we're going to develop future leaders, we must set the example. We must set the example. In your teaching, show integrity. Does what you say match up with what you do? Seriousness of soundness of speech. Soundness of speech. We all talk a lot, don't we? Now I'm going to throw something out here that I think got me in trouble last hour, but I'm still going to throw it out because I like the statistic. There's a statistic that I saw that women on average speak 10,000 words a day. Can I get an amen? Amen. And men only speak about 5,000 words a day. And I thought about that for a moment. I thought, first of all, who does that? Who sits around and counts how many words that you do? You know, just like a couple weeks ago, I said, how do you have 2.5 kids? I mean, but anyway. But I got to thinking about, okay, someone might not actually count, but I thought back on some of my conversations with Holly over the last couple of weeks. One thing I didn't realize my wife could talk so much. She calls, she talks, and I know it's true because I'm sitting on the other end. I'm just going, yes, okay. I don't get any words in, so I think it's true. They can talk 10,000 words a day. But with all that being said, and all the fun happening, we got to understand the seriousness of the soundness of our speech. Now, while there's a difference in the amount of words we use, there's no difference in how we use our words. Soundness of speech means to be sure of what we say. You know, I am amazed in ministry over the last decade of ministry. It amazes me the things I hear come out of Christians' mouth. I hear slander. I hear character assassinations. I hear hatred. I've heard gossip. And I just do not understand how we as God's children, as we as Christians, how we can let those words flow out of us. But the more I thought about it, I can kind of understand because we live in a world that encourages that. We don't have encouragement of speaking love to one another and sharing it. You see, it's not just what I think, it's what the Bible says. Listen to what some of these scriptures say about speech. Ephesians 4:15, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, which is Christ. Colossians 4:6, let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Proverbs 22:11, he who loves a pure heart and whose speech is gracious will have the king for his friend. And finally, Proverbs 12:22, the Lord, listen to this, detests lying lips, but He delights in men who are truthful. Words matter. Our speech matters. And I think the Lord is pretty serious about how we use our speech. Next, we need to do good. Now, we understand that we're not saved by our good works, but our good works are a reflection, are evidence of our salvation and our love for Christ. Therefore, we should strive to always do good. Our actions have a lot of repercussions in our world. I don't know how many of you remember Joe DiMaggio, but he was a very famous baseball player with the New York Yankees. He was interviewed one time. They asked Joe, they said, why do you run down the first after you get a walk? You know, you watch baseball today, if someone gets a walk, that's what they do. They walk down the line. But I was told in this article that he would sprint down the baseline to first base. He says, why do you do that? He goes, well, I got to thinking, somebody may be watching me for the first time. Somebody might have come to the game, never seen me before, and I don't want to disappoint them. Folks, that is what we should be like in our Christian life. Somebody is always watching us. We don't want to disappoint them. We want to do the best we can with the most excellent things that we can do to give God the glory. So that we need to pass that on to our future generation as well. Now, when we begin to pass on to our future generation and we're preparing for God to move, we got to understand that there's going to be opposition. We need to prepare for opposition. And we got to get that because Satan doesn't want us to prepare for the future. He wants us to stay comfortable. He wants us to stay where we are now. He doesn't want us to prepare for the future. So there's going to be opposition. And it will come from different places. The first opposition will come from the world. The world won't understand. They won't understand. People will say, who are you trying to judge me? Who are you to tell us what is right and wrong? You can't tell people how to live. You see, worldly opposition has a way of making us withdraw. That we just kind of sink back, kind of like a turtle in the shell, where we just kind of sink back because we don't want to stir the waters too much. That's where the worldly opposition comes in. Next, we will have some opposition from the religious world. Notice I didn't say Christian churches or Baptists or anything like that, but just the religious world in general. I mean, Jesus understood this. In John chapter 1, verses 10 through 11, he says, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, listen to this, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Why is the religious world so critical of one another? Because Satan is active. Next, our opposition will come from the government. We've got to understand that. We live in a country that is free to worship God. We get that. But eventually, we all see the backsliding coming. We're not going to be able to worship probably. We're going to be criticized. We're going to have persecution. And Paul understood this when he was writing to Titus, because he understood there was persecution in Rome. And there may be persecution for us in the future. So we need to prepare for that. So what is the key to handling this opposition? How do we take care of this? Verse 8, I love how it says this. Listen to what it says. Live in such a way, positively, for Jesus, for God. Live in such a way that those who oppose you will be ashamed because they have nothing to say. They have nothing against you. They can get all excited. They can say, but there's really nothing I have to say. Because we live in such a way to glorify the Lord. Folks, our church has a future. We determine what that future is going to be. Our future can be dismal. We can wring our hands and we can say, oh man, the past, the glory days were in the past. And man, just think how great it was back in the 80s and 70s. And we were running this and we were doing that. Or we can look forward to the future, preparing the people behind us, working with those who are with us now, getting ready for the return of Jesus Christ. We have a future, and we're in charge of that future. How are we going to do it? We can follow the example of Titus. We can follow it. We can develop young believers. We can be mature believers setting an example for the future. And when we do that, we need to prepare to be opposed. Now, I kind of want to wrap up with this. So if the worship team wants to start to come up, you can. But I just want to wrap up with this. I heard a preacher this week, and I know this isn't a mistake, because God works in wonderful ways, and I know He places things in our life where we can share with other people. But I was listening to this sermon this week where this church, where the youth were leading the worship. And the pastor got up and he said, wasn't that great? Didn't they do such a great job? And we've always heard this comment before. We've always heard the children are our what? Future. They're our future. But listen to what this pastor said. And it just struck me so much. He goes, these children, these teens, these youth are not our future. He goes, they are now. They're here now. We need to encourage them. We need to lift them up because they are here now, not the future. They need to participate now. God is concerned about the future of our church as well. But more than our future, He is concerned about our present condition. Where are we? I'm learning so much. I don't know where everything is right now. Matter of fact, I don't know everybody's name. That's why I was so excited this week when Zach came in and he showed me we had these window decals. I was like, what are they? Because we used them for our cars. We put them on our cars. And I was like, oh, praise Jesus. And he said, why? I said, because now when I'm driving around town, I'll know who to be good to. Because I don't know everybody. So I see the sticker. I know to be good to you. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1 and 2. I don't know why I said that. But this is what he said. As God's fellow workers, we urge you not to receive God's grace in vain. For he says, in the time of my favor I heard you, and in the day of salvation I helped you. I tell you, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation. My friends, I am excited about the future. Our future is not determined by what we did in the past. Our future is determined by what we do right now in the present, and how we're preparing, and how we're setting up the future for God's kingdom. I told you last week that you'll hear that a lot, that we are in God's kingdom now. Yet we're not in heaven now, we're not there, but we are preparing for it. Are we getting ready for it? Or are we just going to sit back and be comfortable with what we're already doing? We have a lot of people here. We have a lot of people in first service who can participate and help us for the future of what we need to do. There's a world that's dying. A world that needs to know the love of Jesus Christ. If you're here this morning and you don't know who Jesus is, we would love to introduce you to Him. We'd love for you to come up and we'll talk with you. That's how you begin this journey of preparing for the future, having Jesus in your heart. So you already know who Jesus is, and He's part of your life, and you kind of backslidden, and you kind of got comfortable over the last few years. We want you to get back in the game. We want to use you. We want you to help us prepare for the future. Whatever your decision is, we encourage you to stand as we sing our song of invitation.